Hey guys, Navin on No Limit Hold'em on Micro Stakes Bovada Zone. And this is in response to a couple of questions. I had somebody put a comment in, and I got an email from another player that I coached for a bit, and they were asking about Micro Stakes Fast Fold Poker. One of the questions was, is it beatable? And if you watched my Run It Up for Nothing stuff, where I literally just cashed my account out, had $0 from frequent player points, didn't bank. I cashed a free tournament, like a free roll, frequent player point free roll, for $2 and some odd cents, and rolled it into, I don't know, I think I cashed out $322 because I left 100 on. Then you know how I feel about the beatability of micro stakes and low stakes online, even without a right back deal. I personally know that they're plenty beatable. The other question was about bankroll requirements for micro stakes and small stakes fast fold. A guy asked if 30 buy-ins for Bovada Fast Fold Poker was too nitty for bankroll requirements, and I think the answer is absolutely yes. I think if I had it to do over again, and I kind of am, I started with a $100 bankroll. I think I'm up to like 160 right now, and I just cashed it out a couple of days back. So if I had it to do over again and I was going to record the whole thing and make kind of a series on it, this is gross. I think he's got so many draws, and I'm getting such a price that I just have to stack this. Yeah, there's 830, 317 over pair. I think we just have to stack it. And we got it in good against a draw. So, cool. Yeah, and you're going to be put in spots like that from time to time that are kind of high variance, but mostly, I think, overall, fast fold, especially micro stakes, Bovada Zone poker is probably the least variance intense poker variant that you're even able to play. I mean, it's real low variance if you play it that way. If you wanted to play NL25 with a $250 bankroll, I think it's absolutely doable, and it's even fine. You just have to pass on some of your marginal EV, like your marginal plus EV spots, pass on all of your break-even spots, and the nice thing about, and really just, punt and look for your slam dunk plus EV situations. And the wonderful thing about this format that's specifically about and really limited to this format is you do not have to concern yourself whatsoever with the concept of balance. It is what they might call a philosophical non-starter in this format. I mean, it doesn't really make sense because every single decision you make and every single hand you play, you're playing in an utter vacuum. So it's all like vacuum EV. In normal situations, when you're playing like, I'll give you a good example from 9 max. If you're playing 9 max, like a full ring game against relatively decent players, or you're going to be playing for a while, you probably, at high enough stakes, I guess, like if you're at 50 NL plus, and you're playing with the same group of people for a while, or if you're playing at the casino that I would say 2-5 plus, then you're going to probably, if you're playing with the same guys day in and day out, you're going to want to, and you're really going to have to consider things like board coverage when you're constructing your ranges. And an example I'll give you is from under the gun, opening a very tight range, say at a full ring 2-5 cash game. Opening a very tight range from under the gun is usually the right idea, but if you're playing against a bunch of good players that play with you often, then you do have to consider board coverage and balance. And at that point, once you actually do have to start taking those things into consideration, it's pretty advisable to start splashing in hands like 7-6 suited and some of the weaker ace-x suiteds, like the ace-2 through ace-5 suiteds, in your under-the-gun opening range. so that when you open under the gun and get called by one, and the player the flop comes out ace, queen, deuce, rainbow, or ace, queen, six, rainbow, so that you'll have, well, let's see, ace, queen, deuce, rainbow. You're going to want to have some hands that want to bluff that flop because you've got such a monstrous range advantage from playing such a tight range under the gun. You want to be able to leverage that range advantage and take advantage of the fact that you usually crush that board by sometimes not crushing that board and being able to continuation bet the flop with utter air when you appear to have a very strong range. And the other side of that coin is when you're opening a super tight range from under the gun against players that know what they're doing and understand your game to a degree. Shit. Can we raise here? I mean, I think I've got the best hand almost always, but I could see him doing something goofy like checking a weak jack on the turn. And I don't know what he calls us with that's worse. I think if we raise there, I doubt he's calling with ace high, so yeah, I could have clicked it back, but then we open ourselves up to like it's a high variance, thin value bet that opens the door for him reshipping on us, which would be just disastrous. So anyway, yeah, that 7-6 suited splash into your under the gun open range at 9 max. Yeah, splashing hands like 7-6 suited allow you not only to have some air in your range that allow you to take advantage of situations where your perceived range really crushes the flop and you want to bet and steal the pot. The other end of that is by having hands like 7-6 suited, ace-2 suited, through maybe ace-5 suited in your under the gun open range, is when the flop comes out like 2-3-4 or 5-6-7, 4-5-6, etc. You don't automatically have to just check and fold and just give up, because sometimes you're going to have some hands that can do battle, and because you're actually going to have some value hands on those flops, then you're also able to put some bluffs in on those flops as well. So adding a hand like 7-6 suited under the gun at a full ring game against good players that know you pretty well and are kind of familiar with your game, it's probably about like a break-even proposition in and of itself, but it adds value to the rest of your overall strategy at the cost of variance. You don't have to do anything like that at fast fold poker. You can just take your slam dunk obvious plus EV spots. You don't have to worry about constructing a light 3-bet range. You don't have to, I mean, you can in certain situations. It's not, going to be bad, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you don't want to, there's no real penalty that you're going to pay, because remember, your bluffs are supposed to break even, or at equilibrium, your bluffs will break even, and they're really in there to fuel your value hands and to make sure you get maximum value from the times when you really do have a big hand, and that is just a non-issue when you're playing anonymous fast fold on like Bovada Zone. You don't need to worry about, for instance, in this spot, this is really close, by the way, like this guy's not deep enough to set mine, this guy is, and my pocket sixes are big enough to have some showdown value against this short stack. If I catch a flop like 5-3-3, I can call at least once. So I think that was close. I think pocket, I think that's disgusting. God, I mean, when I'm ahead, I'm just barely ahead. Really wish you would have bet small and I could take a look at a turn card. Oh well. Yeah, one of the nice things is, in fast fold, you don't really have to mess around with spots like that. You can just fold. That was probably, I think that was probably minus EV with the guy behind me, but if that had been heads up, it would have been such a close call. And you can just fold it, just throw it into the muck. He never asked him how often you fold to that shove. And the reason I think that was probably minus EV is because, yeah, I think I'm folding the best hand pretty often, and I've got backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw. But the hands that I'm beating have way more equity against me than the hands that that the hands that are beating me a lot worse than the hands I'm beating. So like even when I'm ahead, I'm going to run to like 2 overcards plus a flush draw so often, and when I'm behind, I'm going to be drawing like to runner. And plus I have the guy behind me that may have done something goofy, or I don't know, made life expensive for me on future streets when I did bank or turn a straight draw or a flush draw. So where was I? Yeah, so you're supposed to be breaking even on your bluffs, theoretically. You don't have to do that. You don't have to take a break-even bluff when you're playing fast fold. And when you're not putting money in as like a coin flip in EV, then you're automatically reducing your variance. I'll give you an example. If you're playing against astute opponents, let's see. I think we ISO here. I think it's close. I do think it's close. The stack sizes made it kind of awkward for me. Yeah, so an example. If you're playing against astute opponents that are really paying attention to your ranges, how you construct them, they know your game, they kind of understand, they're looking for imbalances, they're trying to pick up information about your tendencies. Against these short stacks, I think we'll just go min plus. We don't mind getting flatted pretty wide by a guy that's probably not great, being that he's playing a $1.66 stack. So yeah, example. Let's say that we're going to take a line where we're going to check raise flop, bomb turn, and jam river, and we're setting it up so that the river jam is going to be a pot-sized bet. I think all options are available here. I think we can limp. I think we can ISO, I think we can fold. I guess in the interest of reducing the variance, we're just going to lay this one down. It's kind of the theme of the video. So if you're going to have some hands on whatever given flop, let's say it's something like 9, 8, 2 with 2 spades, your pre-flop caller, and you're going to check raise flop, bomb turn, jam river, and your river bet, you're going to set it up so that your river bet is exactly 1 pot-sized bet. So you're going to do the math. You're going to know that when you check raise to whatever size and are called, it's going to form a pot that if you bet pot on the turn and get called, it's going to leave you 1 pot size bet behind. If you're playing against a really good player, you're going to need to make sure that you get to the river and jam the river with pretty close to a 2-to-1 value to bluff. A 2-to-1 value to bluff equity distribution. I guess that'd be the way to put it. Because you're giving your opponent 2-to-1 on the call. So if he's got a bluff catcher heavy range, which assumably would be the case most of the time, if he's just calling your check raise on the flop, calling your turn bet, then when you get to the river, you're going to be likely pretty polarized, and your opponent's going to have a range that's probably built up mostly or maybe even almost exclusively of bluff catchers. Then your distribution, the distribution that you're going to need to break even in a vacuum is going to be 2-to-1, or I should say break even against an optimal playing opponent. Yeah, so your break even is, your game 3 optimal range is going to be 2 value hands for every 1 bluff to make your opponent indifferent between calling and folding as bluff catchers. That causes you to capture the full value of the pot on average with this range construction. But the bluffs that you throw into there are breaking even. It's the value hands that make the money in that scenario. Whereas if you're playing fast fold, your opponents are never going to catch on to imbalances in your ranges because they don't know who you are. They've only seen you check, raise, flop, bomb, turn, and jam river one time, one hand, this hand that you're playing right now. So you can dial down the bluffing a lot and really only take pristine double barrels and pristine triple barrels. That last hand was a little goofy because I did pick up equity on the turn, but it was only a 9 high flush draw, so it was kind of close. And I did plan on triple barreling if I got, just the right card. But I don't need to worry about triple barreling the 2 that came out and paired the board. I don't have any of that in my range, so I think it would have just got called too often, and there's no reason to put money in just to maybe break even and balance my range. So because you're not having to spend, I don't want to say spend money, but spend variance with things like balance and making sure that you have the right board coverage, you can really focus on taking the less volatile, most plus EV options, and I think the game can be played where you're only taking like the best C-bet, well, you're still going to be C-betting a lot, but you're only going to be taking like the best double barrels and the very best triple barrels, and you're able to 3-bet value only if you want to. Now, what I will say is players tend to play very honest from the first 3 seats, picking up some kind of 10-7, 10-8 offsuit on the button an awful lot. Players tend to play very, very honest from low jack, high jack, and cutoff, in my experience with Bovada fast fold poker. But they get pretty aggressive with their opening ranges on the button. When they open raise the button, I think your average player's opening the button like probably at least 50%. I'm doing a bit more than that. Maybe your average player's opening more like 40%, but still there's going to be a real big gap between the range of hands that are opening from the button and the range of hands that they'll call a 3-bet with from the button. So that is one spot where I think you can 3-bet light, is from the small blind or the big blind. If you have a hand that's maybe just not good enough, like just not quite good enough to flat call from the big blind especially, or the small blind, then you can 3-bet those hands. I think it's fine to do that. And yeah, it's a bluff, but I mean it's a pre-flop bluff, so it's more like a semi-bluff. You're gonna 3-bet, you're gonna get folds, even when you get calls. Let's see. I think this lends itself pretty well to betting 3 streets, not for balance, because I think it's literally going to be a good line with just about every card but the 6. Now, I still think if we go half pot, we'll fold all the draws that missed. He'll fold his 4x, he'll fold his 2x. The 6 was a bad card, but I still think if we bet half the pot, we're going to get at least 1/3 folds, and that's all we need. And I think probably something more like 40% or 50% of this range folds. So. But right there is an example. Like, we see that there's a lot of hands that would have called the flop and the turn and given up on the river. And as long as it's more than 1/3 of his range, we don't expect to be raised, we can go ahead and bluff those spots. But we don't have to do it just to make sure that we have the right distribution or the right ratio between value bets and bluffs. All of which is going to shave variance off and cut volatility out. And I think make for a higher number of buy-ins per hour. I think if you really cranked on this fold button, and that's a big part of it. And there's, there were only something like 28 players in the queue, so this isn't a full queue. It's going to lag behind a little bit. I thought it'd be fine since I'm talking and rambling anyway. But if you do have a full queue of 50+ players, and you just get in here and just jam on this fold button, like, we'll open this if it folds just, and only take like the slam dunk spots, you can get to them pretty quickly. I'm a big fan of ISOing in this format. People limp pretty honest from late position. I don't think that we're going to get called by let's see. Yeah, I think probably checking back makes the most sense. We'll be able to call a lead on a lot of turns. And if he's just going to check twice, we're just going to bet and try to just take it down. Fold out his overcard equity. There's no sense. And if we're not going to be able to catch bluffs and he's pretty much put the white flag up, we may as well just protect our equity. Really just get him to surrender his equity. Or, you know, catch value from kind of a meekly played draw. You know, sometimes he has a draw, I guess, and checks twice and calls a bet on the turn. 10-7 again. So yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to get across is hit that jam on that fast fold button often. Your opponents are not going to know if you're squeeze happy, so squeeze often because it's an awesome, awesome strategy. It's an awesome little bit of strategy. It works very well. I think we're the only player that can legitimately rep something now that it's gone check, 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 and a 2 comes on the turn. If he called here, I would be barreling again because I think he's picking up draws when he calls and hitting like the 2 pretty often. So I would have been betting turn and river there a high percent of the time if he did call. But I thought that would get through an awful lot because, you know, it makes sense that we check under the gun, hoping somebody else bets. But by the time they all check through and a blank comes on the turn, it's pretty unlikely that any of them were sandbagging, especially the guy in latest position. So if he had called me, once again, it means he probably improved on the turn. Here we have showdown value. It's not the most robust. I wouldn't hate if somebody bet here. 4 or 5. Yeah, I still think we're going to check. This time we'll check and call. And now it's going to be pretty gross if he bets. I mean, he really only has monsters and air. I don't think he's checking an ace back on that flop. Yeah, I think he's full of it. Yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. Kind of. I mean, I'm a little surprised that he checked flush draw back, but yeah, I mean, he had to have checked something back that he decided to go a little crazy with, so not super surprising. King 10. Yeah, King 10 offsuit under the gun. I don't know. It's a hand you can play. It's probably a little better than break even, but if you're trying to reduce your volatility, I play a pretty tight range under the gun. I'd really steal a little bit more liberally from cutoff and go crazy on the button. I feel like good players, like if you see somebody with a full stack or maybe even a bit better than a full stack, they tend to give your cutoff open raises more credit. I find that I get 3-bet much less often when I open cutoff compared to opening the button. This is pretty close too, but again, because players tend to play pretty honest from the first 3 seats, I think we can let that go because we rarely dominate our opponent's hand. He often dominates us. We're out of position. And we can just hit the fold button and pick up a new spot. 9-5 offsuit. I think we'll lay that down. You can open it. I mean, I'm sure it's plus EV to open anything remotely close to reasonable from the button. Okay, so I want to keep this video in at under, where are we? Under 25 minutes was the game plan. Let's see how we do with that. So, yeah, just to recap, can we play microstakes fast fold profitably? Absolutely. I firmly believe all forms of microstakes pretty much. Well, I guess I can really only say no limit hold'em, microstakes poker on Bovada is definitely profitable if you play relatively well. You can make some money, you can grow a bankroll doing it for sure. I've done it more than once. You've watched it. And the other thing is, in terms of variance, I think if you are selective about your spots, then the variance is pretty low, meaning your bankroll requirements are also going to be relatively low. And because you're playing fast fold anonymous poker, you'll be able to pick your spots without paying a big penalty in the form of being predictable. So I think that's all I have for right now. So until next time, Navinod over and out. Thanks for watching.